Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
So I grew up in a very small town next to the Mexico border in America. My family had taught me about being cautious of human traffickers and drug traffickers in our area because of the recent cases. Not quite sure if that's important to the story, but it definitely helped with how I acted. My best friend and I, who were both 14 at that time and in high school, decided to take a walk in a nearby park. It was a very popular park, and it was a walking distance from both of our houses, so off we went. As we were walking around and talking, a grown man who was about in his 40s came up to us. He said that he was new in town and didn't know where anything was. My friend and I gave each other a look of slight nervousness, but we kept our cool. We didn't engage him much in the conversation, but we could tell that it was getting more and more uncomfortable. He asked if we went to the local middle school that was down the street, and I said we were high schoolers, but didn't mention which one. It already bothered me that a grown man wanted to talk to who he thought were middle school kids. Then I noticed something and gave my friend a signal with my eyes. There was another man behind us, also following us. I wouldn't have even noticed him if the guy talking to us didn't give the guy a smile when I confirmed that we were underaged. This man kept his head down when I looked back. He wore a hat, seeming to hide his face. And as we walked around the park, the first guy kept asking questions, and the second guy didn't stray too far and didn't even try to act as though he wasn't following us. This was getting too much for me. The first man's questions were either about our small town or about our lives in the town. Nothing too invasive. Well, until he asked for our phone numbers. This was almost 10 years ago, and even though smartphones were a thing, I had a flip phone, and we were broke teens. My friend claimed that she didn't have a phone. I can't remember if this was true or not, but I do remember knowing that I couldn't pull the same sentence due to being on my phone fiddling with it. It's a flip phone, so there isn't much to do on it in the first place. So I just admitted that I'd rather not give out my number. He then started telling me things like, come on, why not? You girls can show me around town. And things like that. I just explained that I had limited texts and minutes, so I don't give out my number easily. This is when I noticed how dark it was getting outside. His questions kept us stuck in the park till dark because we were too scared to try to walk home and out of a fairly popular park where there were other people who we could run to if worse comes to worse. These guys were much bigger than us, and we didn't find anyone we knew. I knew that we couldn't keep delaying, so I decided to just bite the bullet. I told him that it was getting too dark and we had to start heading home. Then, directed my friend towards the edge of the park to our houses. But that didn't stop him. He followed after saying that he could drive us home and that we wouldn't have to walk. I lied, and I claimed that it was just down the block. It was about 5 very long blocks away, and Google says it's a 20-minute walk. He claimed that he wouldn't feel right just letting 2 young girls walk home alone. And then he pointed at a nearby parking lot saying, "Look, my car's not too far. Let me drive you home." At this moment, I noticed the second man following us was suddenly only 2 or 3 steps behind us instead of the distance that he was at. Nope. I am not dealing with this. I said it was faster if we just walked, then quickly said bye and nice to meet you, and then sped off. My mom always taught me to be polite, and looking back, I wish she hadn't. Ladies, don't be polite to men that creep you out. I was too young, but if this happened now, I wouldn't have been so polite. My friend and I speedwalk across the street only to see both men hurry to the parking lot. I didn't think much about them hurrying away, only feeling a rush of relief that they weren't following us anymore. The relief, however, was short-lived. We were on the left side of the road, and while walking, we noticed a van turn onto the street on the right side of the road, and it was freaking them. They were obviously on the opposite side of the road, but they were hardcore staring at us as they drove by, only to do a sharp turn at the end of the block. And feeling a bit wary, we decided to cross the street just in case. And it was the right decision. They came right back to the road, and luckily this time, we were on the right side of the street and they were on the left side. Luckily, these streets were pretty big so they couldn't just drive on the opposite side. There were more stairs as they drove past, only to do another sharp turn at the end of the block. There was nothing for us to do in the middle of this long block except to hide and hope for the best. We ducked behind a car parked in someone's driveway and waited. An old lady spotted us and seemed suspicious, but didn't say a word. She watched the street as well, and there went by the same van. We couldn't see them at our angle, but we knew that it was the van. The van drove by much, much slower. We felt like it was taking forever for them to clear out the block. "They left. You should be good," said the old lady. We thanked her, and then we ran towards where we lived. She lived closer than me, so after I made sure that she was home, I then ran all the way to my house nonstop. I kept my eye on the street for vans, but they either lost us or gave up. I still never been more scared than that night, running 2 blocks home at night by myself. I want to preface this by saying that while I don't live in the safest neighborhood, I have lived here all my life without feeling unsafe. Neighborhoods like mine, which are impoverished and predominantly minority, are often labeled as dangerous, but they foster a strong sense of community among all the residents. One night, I was walking home after leaving my apartment to buy something at a nearby store. I live in a city that never sleeps, and it was only around 10 or 11 p.m., so it was just a regular early night of me going to the deli to get snacks. There was nothing eerie or weird or dangerous about it. And as I entered my apartment building, a man hurried to catch the door before it closed behind me. It's common for people, including myself, to forget their keys or need to use the intercom to enter. So, I held the door for him despite not recognizing him and sensing that he was intoxicated. My building has 2 sides, and I assumed that he lived on the other side since he wasn't a familiar face to me. Like I said, I have lived here all my life and I know most of my neighbors. As I walked into the lobby, there was another boy waiting for the elevator, and thinking back, I don't believe I recognized him either. When the elevator arrived, the boy and I walked in, and at the last minute, the man grabbed the door to join us as it was closing. It was then that I noticed the man had been lingering off to the side of the lobby, waiting for the elevator too, and I began feeling uneasy. Because the man had entered at the last moment and he was able to see the elevator floor button that I pressed. His finger hovered over the button of the floor that I had just pressed, as if he was also going to press that one, until he noticed that it was already pressed. I immediately felt my stomach drop, as I definitely knew that he was not someone who lived on my floor. Thankfully, the other boy in the elevator was going to a floor higher than mine. When we reached my floor, the man exited the elevator and held the door open, expecting me to exit after him. I hesitated, silently staring at him without moving. Something inside me urged me to stay in the elevator. And once he realized that I wasn't getting out, he let the door shut, and I immediately heard his footsteps going straight down the stairs to exit the building. I stared at the boy, wondering if I should say something, worried that he would think that I was weird for staying on the elevator even though we passed my floor. I didn't say anything. We reached his floor, and he silently got off, and I took the elevator back down to my floor. I went in my apartment, and then I locked all my doors. What scares me the most about this is that my parents were out of the country, so if that creepy man would have forced his way into my apartment, I would have been alone. I don't know if he was really after me or if I made the whole thing up in my head, but I have never had a feeling of intuition or uneasiness like that before. And looking back, I wonder if that boy was a guardian angel. A few years ago, my girlfriend, me, and 4 of our friends rented a cabin for a few days during spring break. We just wanted a place where we could all chill and do whatever. The only determined plan we did make was for all of us to go rock climbing together. The cabin was bigger than expected too. It had 3 bedrooms, one with a master bath, and then another separate bathroom, which was great. The living room was spacious enough for all of us to watch a movie in, and the kitchen was big enough for one of my friends to cook a full-course meal. He was going to a culinary school at that time, so he was always willing to cook for someone, and we were always willing to be the guinea pigs. The kitchen had a door to the back covered porch, which then led out to an open field with a big fire pit and trees that lined the back of it. It was perfect, especially for the price. And if it wasn't obvious, there were 3 couples and we all drove separate cars and met there. We all chipped in and split the cost of our food, drinks, and entertainment, and legitimately all worked out really well. I think the worst part that we had experienced was Mike and Jess missing a turn and having to guide them backwards. Well, that was until the second night. The night had a slight chill to it, but nothing a bonfire couldn't fix. So we went to start a fire and realized that none of us brought lighter fluid, so we started looking around the cabin for a lighter or matches or anything. We finally found a lighter that barely worked in the bathroom and was able to get our fire started. We all grabbed some drinks and sat by the fire, just talking and screwing off. When I noticed Leslie staring off, I nudged my girlfriend Madison to look at her, and then she called her out. That's when Leslie pointed out a figure standing by the trees. Isaiah, being the guy that's not afraid of anything, called him out, asking if he wanted to join us, or if he at least had a lighter. After we all sat there snickering, we watched as he slowly turned and walked towards the driveway and then down the hill until we couldn't see him anymore. This place was like a campground but with cabins, so we weren't really in the middle of nowhere. So at first, we just assumed that it was someone at a neighboring cabin watching us, possibly mad about us being outside, possibly being loud, you know? That was actually a tame night, but some people are pretty whiny like that, so we decided to just take it back inside since the fire was weak anyways. And the rest of the night was just us playing a game inside, and it went just fine. The next day was our rock climbing and hiking day. We all piled into Jess's Jeep, and then we headed to the place. And the event went great. We were all having a lot of fun. We ended up coming across a lake at the bottom of a small cliff, And being the dumb young people we were, we all made bets and dared Isaiah to jump into the lake from the top of the overhang. And like I said, it wasn't that high up, and swimming was permitted in that lake, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was more so just his girlfriend that didn't want him to do it, but as dumb guys do, he did it anyway. And once we all got in, I just enjoyed floating on the water and people watching, when I noticed someone who stood out. It was a guy standing over by the cliffside that Isaiah jumped from, but the reason he stood out was because of his choice of clothing. While everyone else around us was in hiking garb, some bathing suits, or even just shorts and a t-shirt, this guy was in black dress pants, a black suit jacket, and a black hat like a fedora style. He had the hat on pretty low, however, so I couldn't see his face. Yet, I felt his gaze. He was definitely staring in our direction, and this time, I said out loud to everyone, "Are we being stared at?" This caused everyone to look in the same direction and notice this guy too. We were all just there having a staring contest and talking amongst ourselves as to why someone would possibly be here dressed like that. And not long after, Isaiah again shouted out to the guy, which caused some of the other people nearby to look around. I assume others noticed the oddity as they began staring, talking, and pointing, which then caused the guy to turn around and walk straight back behind the ledge, until he was gone. We all thought this was weird, but I, at least, didn't connect it to our previous night's experience at this point. I just thought that it was someone being weird. We ended up leaving shortly after to get stuff for dinner, as well as some lighter fluid, just to be prepared for our next fire. After dinner and freshening up, we tried to have a bonfire again. This time, it went a lot better, and we had loosened up and were having a blast. We were talking and teasing. The girls were even pushing their limits and making a fool of themselves. It was genuinely a great time for us. Well, that was until Leslie was again caught staring into the trees. That's when we all turned to look and saw the same guy. This form was the same, but with a giant flashlight Mike bought this time, we could shine the light right on him. He was wearing the same pants and suit, jacket, and hat. And when the light hit him, he didn't really budge though. He leaned his head down some, probably to block out some of the light, but otherwise, he didn't do anything else. Isaiah again yelled at the sky, but it was a bit more threatening. I don't really blame him though. The girls were getting pretty nervous, and this guy had obviously been following or watching us. But this time, after a lot of shouting, I think most of us started feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and we all agreed to go inside. Once in, Madison actually called the cabin management office and told them that someone was being creepy around our cabin and said that they would send someone out to take a look. The rest of the night wasn't as eventful, as the staring guy kind of made us sober up some, but we did watch another movie until some of us started getting drowsy. Leslie and Isaiah went to their room. Madison went to bed before the second movie ended, and I followed her after it was over, leaving Mike and Jess in the living room. Mike was already snoring, so I assumed they weren't going anywhere. I don't know the exact time, but I know that it wasn't more than an hour or so after I went to bed that I woke up to a piercing scream. Madison had been startled awake too, and after confirming that it wasn't her, I ran out of the room to find out what the hell had happened. I found Jess screaming in the living room. The front door was wide open, and Mike was gone. She then explained that she woke up to a scratching sound And when she looked at the window behind the couch they were on, she saw someone trying to open it or at least standing at it. She then said that Mike ran out of the door to catch the guy. Isaiah and I ran out after him, but found him shouting towards the trees. When we caught up to him, he said that he had caught up to the guy, knocked his hat off, but the guy fought back with pepper spray or something to that sort. He said something hit his face which made his eyes burn and it was hard to breathe. We brought him back to the cabin and this time, we called the cops and the office people. This time, Madison was not as nice. Police actually showed up pretty quickly and then took our report. And then they looked around the cabins. They even went to a couple nearby and questioned those people too. They, of course, never found the guy or his hat. This guy most likely was brazen enough to go back and get it and still miss the cops. Jess took Mike to the hospital and Madison agreed to go with her while the rest of us stayed behind. We never saw the guy again that night, but none of us went back to sleep either. After a few hours, the others came back and confirmed that it was just some sort of pepper spray, so he was going to be alright, but the trip had already been ruined. Jess, Leslie, and Mike were definitely not interested in staying the rest of the trip. No one could blame them either. And after some talking, we ended up packing up all of our stuff that night, and the other 4 took off. Madison and I were pretty shaken up too, but we still had this book for one more night, and she really wanted to give the front desk people a piece of her mind. I guess they didn't seem too concerned about the situation when she first called, and yeah, they probably should have been because it was their property and that could have been damaged. So we put all of our belongings in the bedroom, locked the door, and tried our best to sleep there. The next morning was exhausting as we didn't really sleep much. Management called us and apologized and said that they could give a partial refund, but they did offer to move us to a different cabin. After informing our friends, they told us to enjoy, but that they didn't want to go back. They did move us to one that had an indoor hot tub, so that was pretty cool. We didn't have another run-in with the guy, but they also never found him. We still to this day have no idea why he targeted us or what his intentions even were if he were to break in. And the fact that he had pepper spray made me think that he had bad intentions of using it, or at least needing it. We haven't been on a trip with the others since, but we all still hang out and remember that creepy spring break that got ruined for us. This story is 100% true, and it's always creeped me out, and I think about it a lot. About 3 years ago, I was out for a late night walk in a park that was about 2 blocks from where I lived at that time. It was a pretty safe neighborhood, so I often felt comfortable walking around alone during the late night hours. I remember it being around 3:30 in the morning. Don't ask why I was up that late or walking around during that time. Let's just say that I was going through some stuff. But in hindsight, I know it wasn't smart, especially as a young woman. Anyway, I approached the park, which was lined with large bushes. There was also a street next to the park, and on the other side of the street was a large grassy field. Suddenly, I spotted a bald man carrying large objects that were wrapped in black plastic. He had on blue surgical gloves and a long plastic jacket. He seemed to be transporting these bagged items across the street from the park and then into the field. I stopped and I watched for a moment as he began crossing the street again with more bagged items. But he stopped when he saw me, and then he ran towards the bushes. He stuffed the bags into the bushes and then hid in them. I could see him clearly, and the whole situation gave me bad vibes. So I quickly turned around and I started walking back home. I glanced back to make sure that he wasn't following me, and I saw his bald head peering over the bushes, staring at me. I started speed walking, and when I was about a block away, I saw him sprint across the street and hide behind a large tree. Again, all I could see was this bald head peering around the side of a tree, just staring at me. By this point, my heart was racing, but I kept walking quickly. I didn't want to run because I didn't want him to know that I could see him following me. My thought process was, if a lion is stalking you, it's not a good idea to run because they will start chasing you. I just focused on staying calm and getting home safely. Finally, I reached my house and I locked both the front and back doors, and I tried to shake off what had happened and then go to sleep. The next day was completely normal. I decided to walk to the park in the daylight when there were lots of people around, and I checked the bushes to see if he had left anything behind. Nothing. Later that night, I sat down to watch a movie. I decided not to go on any more late night walks after that incident. Even though nothing happened to me, it was creepy, and I realized that it could have turned into a bad situation. You never know what someone like that is capable of. It definitely seemed like I had caught him doing something suspicious. While I was watching the movie, I then got up to grab a glass of water. My kitchen has a window next to the sink with a view of the backyard, and I always kept the kitchen lights off at night so that I could keep an eye out in the yard without anyone being able to see me. When I looked out into the backyard, to my surprise, I saw him standing in the middle of my yard, just staring at my house. I knew it was him because even in the dark, I could make out his pale bald head. I immediately cracked open the window and yelled, "Hey!" And he took off running, leaving the gate to my fence wide open. Since then, I never saw the man again. I still have no idea what he was doing that night or what his intentions were in following me home and also stalking my house. But I don't think I want to know.
And here's the riddle for this video.
Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.